This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Roy, welcome to Tech Talk.
Frank, great to be here.
Well, we get together kind of just about once a year, especially around the time of the cyber simulation that's coming up. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a few seconds, but right at the moment, for our listeners who may not be fully aware about the Information Security Society at TAG, go into a little bit about that and maybe cover what the mission is.
Thank you. The Information Security Society at TAG is one of the many societies under the Technology Association of Georgia umbrella. The society is really designed to help practitioners to stay aware of threats, to stay aware of industry issues, to educate, but also to provide fellowship and to connect the society members to each other. One of the things that we found is that there are lots of places where you can go and learn about things, learn best practices, those sorts of things. But one of the things that people just can't find is that group, that safe haven, where they can go and ask questions, go and bounce ideas off of each other, and do it in a safe environment. And that's one of the core missions of TAG and the Information Security Society. We've been doing it for a long time now, back before data privacy and security were the buzzwords that they are today. But the mission really remains the same, and that's to educate our community, but also to foster kind of a camaraderie within the community. Really neat stuff.
Well, truly, with the security situation and peaked out the way it has, and of course, it doesn't seem to be any end to it in terms of its layers and tentacles and the compounding and levels of sophistication and threats, having a safe haven, a safe place the way you're talking, very unique, but extremely, extremely valuable to a lot of our listeners and to a lot of the people who have that responsibility. You know, one of the things that we often talk about is the rapid change in technology. We'll say it's dynamic or dynamic fluidity or exponential. We use all kinds of ways to describe how fast things are changing. The landscape in cybersecurity is absolutely phantasmagoric. I think it just is almost amazing just how much it's changed over just even the last year or two. Go into a little bit about that. How has cybersecurity, especially the landscape, how has it changed?
It's really scary how much it's changed. I was having a conversation just this past weekend with somebody, and, you know, the iPhone, which is just ubiquitous now, it's been around for less than 10 years. I mean, it really hasn't been that long. You know, a time that you now have these personal computers and these devices in your hands that are infinitely more powerful, infinitely may be too strong of a word, but many times over more powerful than the desktop computers of you know, the yesterday. But it's really just amazing how much, because of that technology, things change and how people really adapt to these new technologies. But like most things, with the good comes the bad, and I think that's the part that people are still trying to get their hands around. How are these technologies really changing the privacy and the security landscape? I've got teenage children, and just looking at them and their adoption of technology, but also, you know, kind of what they're willing to put out there into cyberspace versus what I'm willing to, you know, that expectation of privacy is just eroding. But one of the things that brings about as a challenge is, how do you deal with, you know, keeping that technology at the forefront to make it user-friendly and usable, but also keep it secure? You know, you look at social media, and, you know, now you can take a picture and post it on social media. People know exactly who took that picture, where you took it, the time you took it, the location. But all of that is information that people really don't quite have their hands around. And then you're starting to see, you know, more, I would say, organized efforts in terms of breaching this type of information. It used to be in the past that a hacker would get on, they'd deface the website, put a little smiley face, ha, 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 you've been hacked. Now the goal is to get in, get that information, mine it, and then sell it or use it for other nefarious purposes. And you see this really kind of ramp up over the past few years and over the last year. One of the good things, I think, with respect to 2015 versus 2014 and the years before is an awareness on the part of people that these things are starting to happen, especially in the business community. I know it used to be very difficult to get to the C-suite or get to the board of directors on privacy and security issues because they deemed it to be the realm of IT. We've got a great IT person and we're good to go because they said we're good to go. Now, because of the big data breaches that really have started to cost people their jobs and their careers, there's an awareness on the C-suite and the board that says, we've got to know about this, and it's not good enough anymore to just look to your IT person and say, are we good? You've got to go deeper. And I think that go deeper, quote unquote, on the part of the higher-ups in these companies will bring greater resources and greater, work to try to mitigate these types of vulnerabilities. So if there's one thing that I would say that's different between 2015 and 2014 is the increased awareness because of these major breaches that really are starting to cause significant damage in terms of privacy and security, but also starting to affect corporate bottom lines. And when it affects the bottom line, you will start to see resources starting to be put towards it. And I think that's what we'll see in 2015 and on into 2016.
Sadly, if it affects the bottom line, a lot of the CEOs aren't around to see the impact of it. Like
that's
you
right.
say, one of the things I think also is curious, not only is it a case where the evolution of the technology, you mentioned the iPhone, certainly cloud, now we're moving into the Internet of Things. I mean, the vulnerability just continues as the convenience continues to expand, and a lot of the C-suite executives are actually consumers, obviously, and so they're impacted on a couple of different levels, not only the awareness, as you're pointing out, with various threats from the B2B or B2C type situation from the enterprise standpoint, but even as individuals with their own personal identity. So a lot of the awareness that you're talking about, I think, is getting more pervasive. I guess the real question centers around, especially with all the data breaches over the past year, that I think the best word would be scary as far as the impact that they've had. For all practical purposes, is security and privacy, can it exist, or is it a non-existent situation, security and privacy living in the same environment?
Well, that's a great question. As a security professional, I just have to think that we can fight the good fight and keep things secure and keep things private. That said, we are in a balancing situation. You have to balance doing business, and you have to balance social media and the ease of use and, the ability to people to connect with the ability to keep that data private and secure to the extent that you want to do it. It's interesting you talk about, C-suite people saying, what about my own personal data? Because I'm a lawyer at Thompson Hine, and I'm in the privacy and data security group, but one of the things that we do every year, and actually I do it a couple of times a year, is a seminar to just talk about what the threats are. And one of the main questions that people ask is, how do I keep my personal data secure? How do I keep my kids' data secure? What should we be doing as individuals to keep that data secure? And in a way, though, that's actually very heartening for me because it's, again, that same awareness that we were talking about. People are starting to realize that, there are these apps out there that will say you could do this and it will disappear and there will be no trace of it. But now people are starting to realize that's not true. And so if I put it out there, I have to realize that it's permanent. Somewhere, somehow, somebody can retrieve that. And that same thought that you apply to your personal information needs to be applied to the corporate information. And if you can keep that mindset of what's out there is out there, and we'll try to keep it secure and we'll try to keep it private, that will go a long ways towards getting a better result at the corporate level. Plus, you really just have to commit to a privacy and security mindset. One of the things that I often tell companies is if we can spend all the resources that you want on technology, but you also have to train your people. You have to create a mindset of awareness on the part of your employees, because it doesn't matter what you do from a technology standpoint. If you've got a disgruntled employee or an untrained employee, and you don't have safeguards around that and you've not trained your employees, you're going to have problems. The majority of the breaches that I see still relate to the human factor. And, to get back to your question, I don't think they're non-existent, but it will require vigilance, and it'll also require that we stay abreast of technology and stay abreast of what systems can do and what these new apps can do. And as consumers, be mindful of, what we're signing up for. One of the things that I often tell people or ask people is, pull out your phone. And most people have, smartphones now with many apps on them, various operating systems. But I ask people, when you signed up for an app and you loaded that app, did you read their privacy policy? When you update that app, did you read their privacy policy? They could be saying, we're going to give away your information. Mm-hmm. And you didn't read that, but just, downloading it, you're signing up for it. So people still have to increase that awareness level. And that's how you're going to keep information more secure and more private. I don't think you can ever get to an absolute. Matter of fact, I'm sure you can, but you can do things to make it more secure and more private.
I think innovation is a narrative that has a continuum rather than something that's spontaneous. It comes from only the Eastern philosophers say a bolt of lightning across a dark sky. It just doesn't come and go. It evolves over an extensive period of time, and we talk a lot about this kind of thing has changed and that kind of thing has changed. And the reality of security is that it's really is fluid. It's in a transitional period that will continue to evolve, and as new technologies and new conveniences, new apps, new, I'm going to say, cultures of acceptance as far as technology is concerned, things like wearables and those kind of stuff that will allow for transaction of not only payment transaction, but communication like health records and those kind of things, is that you've really, I guess, in part to add from my perspective, what you're saying is you got to take a proactive and not a reactive role, but you also have to be willing to realize that it's inevitable that security is important, and it's partly in fact, probably a large part, your responsibility. But yet the other side of it is that the continuum will just do that. Things will continue to move, things will advance, and unfortunately, just like anything else, there's good and bad. The bad doers are going to come along with the good as we progressively become that much more conveniently sophisticated in terms of our technology. I always have a fun question that I like to ask some of our visitors, and I can imagine for you that you've got a pretty good answer to this one, and that is that inevitable question about if you were a tree. No, I'm kidding. I'll leave that to someone else. This one is, what keeps you up at night? Do you really have something that, I'm thinking probably the power grid or something to that effect rather than someone's personal security, but maybe go into a little bit from a professional standpoint, just that, what keeps you up at night, and really what should keep companies up at night?
Right. What keeps me up at night is, and again, because I have teenagers, I am a little bit more in tune to this than some people might be, and that is the kind of degradation of people's expectations of privacy and security, and because of that, people almost just don't care until something happens. Mm-hmm. We're in the day of the wearables. Now you're starting to see the watches come out. You see the exercise bands that are transmitting data of all kinds back to your phone and then back to, a server somewhere. And people don't have any concept of that, of what that really means to them and their privacy. And I worry because I see in the personal space kind of us going down on a downward slope in terms of what we expect. You get letters now all the time, and it's almost kind of a shell shock effect. You get another data breach letter, and you get credit monitoring for a year. And now people don't care. When they first started coming out, people got concerned. Now people look at it and say, nothing happened the last 10 times I got this letter. And so we're not demanding of our companies and of ourselves, quite frankly, kind of that high level, that high expectation of privacy and security. And so I do worry about that as we kind of, you almost see that downward slope towards an Orwellian society. And so that's on the personal level of concern. And then from a corporate standpoint, I think companies, despite the increased awareness, still don't have their hands around technology and what it really means to employ that technology. So, for example, cloud applications. Companies have rushed to the cloud because from a dollar standpoint it made sense, but they really haven't taken the time to understand what that really means. Where's my data being held? Who has access to it? What third parties have access to it? That's a concern. Mobile devices continue to be something that really worries me a lot, because with the device itself, you've got tons of data. With the apps that are on it, you've got much more. And each app that you put on there is a potential vector for some type of nefarious behavior. And so you really, have to think about these things. And I don't think that companies are thinking about it to the extent that they should be. And you just have to wonder what can transpire that will cause it to be to really get people to say, okay, we have to deal with it. One of the things that you mentioned was infrastructure. I would not be surprised if over the next year or two we saw a major infrastructure breach. And quite honestly, we may have already seen it, and we just aren't aware of it. All of a sudden your phone doesn't work for a little while, the network is down, or your health records can't be accessed for an hour or two, or the power goes out, and you have a blackout or brownout, and nobody really says what's going on. So I wouldn't be surprised if we've already seen it. My fear is that it will get worse before it might get better.
One of the things that I think it's kind of almost an unfair challenge to a degree. If you're a small to medium-sized manufacturer, if you're an owner of an enterprise or a business and you're a small company, you're pressured to look at change, not to look at legacy systems, but to consider what's next. Right. And I'm often reminded of a quote of Steve Jobs that said, "You don't know what you want people don't know what they want until they see it."
Right.
So in a lot of cases, the enterprise operator isn't going out with a solution, looking for a solution. They're going out for a problem and trying to find a solution. And so trust becomes a factor. So in reality, how do you deal with that kind of relationship in terms of making the right decisions, in terms of not jumping in and getting in, as you were talking, Roy, I was thinking of that proverbial comment about we'll pass the bill first and then we'll read it. I think that there's a lot of cases where a lot of these applications, a lot of the software, a lot of the technology come with so much jargon and so many papers and information that you have to read that you just automatically figure, well, it must be okay. Everybody else is signing it, and you go ahead and sign it yourself. Well, dive a little bit deeper as it relates to companies. I mean, I'm putting you on the spot, but if companies could only focus on one thing, what, in your opinion, what would that one thing be?
Wow. That is an on-the-spot question. The thing that I would say is, again, going back to something I said earlier, and that is most of the breaches that I see are still human-related. They are somebody did something that they shouldn't have done. Although phishing attacks have become much more common and much more sophisticated, you still see that as a way that companies are infiltrated. You will still see employees that will click the link, for some bank or some investment account that somebody's sending them, and they'll click the link, and all of a sudden their computer is infected and the network is infected. And, you still see that. You still see, breaches happen because a laptop was left in a car and somebody popped the window, took that laptop, and, oh, by the way, the laptop wasn't encrypted. Those sorts of things, unfortunately, you still see a lot of. And so if I had to say one thing to companies, and that would be work with your people, train your people continuously, not one time, but annually. Raise the level of awareness, create kind of a culture of privacy and data security, and that much more than any single technology solution that you can implement. And I'm not saying you shouldn't implement those technology solutions, but that training, that awareness on the part of your employees will go so much further in helping to make your company secure and that data secure and that data keep it private. That would be the one thing that I would say to companies, because I still see it. I see millions being spent on technology solutions that, like you said, people probably don't really understand, and very little being spent on people solutions where you can have a tremendous impact.
Well, and again, it's that the battle of good and evil. You were mentioning earlier about information coming to you that is unsolicited, that tells you click this document to get more information and find out why your account is or what kind of benefit you've got coming to you, and you click it, and of course, boom, you open yourself to all kinds of potential damage. And I remember going to a conference a couple of years back where the speaker said, one thing about a lottery is that you can't win the lottery if you never bought a ticket.
Right.
So some of those things that come in, kind of ask yourself twice, do I really have an account at such and such that I need to check on my status of that account? Well,
that's exactly right.
I mentioned earlier in the conversation about what really started out a couple of years ago as somewhat of a novelty. I think now it's become one of the premier events of the year that everybody really just anxiously looks forward, not only from an education experience, but from an entertainment experience, because it's usually such great information, but it's also great fun, and that is the Information Security Society has its, and I can't believe it, third annual cyber simulation that's coming up in May. Tell a little, before we run out of time, but tell us a little bit about that and some of our audience, how they might either participate or attend.
Right. Thanks for asking about it. It is a phenomenal event. We started it 2 years ago, and this is the third installment. It's a tabletop simulation, which means that it is an interactive data breach in real time. And so what we do is we get actors, and when I say actors, these are actually people in the industry, different companies, different roles, and you actually take roles at a fictitious company, and then a data breach happens. Real time, the people are on stage, and they have to react to the data breach. This year we're doing it with a utility company. We've done it with a media company before. And the beauty of it is not only do the people on the stage, but the people in the audience they really get to see how one of these attacks occurs in real time. And they don't know what's going to happen until it actually happens. And it happens real time. Different threats start appearing, different scenarios, and it's an evolving thing. It takes about 2 hours to do, and it is really, really unique. And the funny thing about it is when we first did it, as you said, ours was the first tabletop simulation that the general public can go to. The government has done them for a long time. Private industry has, big companies, but just for the general public, hadn't happened. We're starting to see more of it, which is actually a phenomenal thing because, again, one of the things for the Information Security Society is to help build these types of events in the general populace and to really increase awareness. So we're excited to be having our third annual one, but we're also excited to see others popping up around the country that are doing the same thing, because if you can increase awareness, then you can help mitigate these risks. So it's phenomenal, and I hope to see you and everybody else there.
Well, if you haven't been, to our listening audience, if you haven't been, it really is. You hear a lot of hyperbole about this is one you don't want to miss. This is one you don't want to miss because it is a real world experience presented in such a unique way that it just really hits home, and you leave talking about it without question. And some of the conversation is about how great it was and how entertaining or informational. Another part of it is you kind of walk away a little paranoid because you've seen the future, and you think to yourself, maybe I better double check on what I'm doing. Well, Roy, is there a way now? Am I wrong about the fact that is there still time for people to participate if they want to actually be one of the role players or actors, or is that already been completed?
There are still.
And then,
roles.
if you wanted to attend, how would you get more information?
Absolutely. There's still roles out there to be had. You know, and if you got on the TAG website, if you were interested in participating as a role player or just attending, there's time for both. Just go to the TAG website, Technology Association of Georgia, which is tagonline.org, and you just go to the Information Security Society. We have our own little mini web page there, and you can find about the cyber simulation and how to participate.
Well, I think the new term would be live hack-free and prosper.
That's right.
Roy, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and for all the work you do each year to make this event such a great success. And as I mentioned, it is gradually becoming one of the premier events. Don't want to miss. Make sure you get some information about it. As Roy says, it's in May. Information Security Society. It's on the TAG website. I'm sure a lot of our listeners know exactly how to get to that information. But get involved and sign up early and participate, because it's a lot of fun, but it's also extremely valuable to be part of it, valuable to experience. Roy, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us for a few minutes today on Tech Talk.
Frank, the pleasure was mine. I really appreciate it.